Hello everyone, welcome back to our YouTube channel. My name is Stephanie, I'm the event coordinator here at Boulder Bookstore, and since Bookstore Romance Day is right around the corner, I thought I would do a video featuring some romance books. So I have to admit I'm not a huge romance reader. I'm kind of I've read some, like I like to read a lot of different things, so I kind of intersperse different sorts of books, but I've in recent years gotten more into romance, so I thought I might share some of those choices with you. So the first book that I'm going to talk about is, I don't have a copy, but here it is, A Duke, the Lady, and a Baby by Vanessa Riley. And the fun thing about this is if you like it, there are two other books in the series. It's called the Rogues and Remarkable Women series, and if you like Vanessa Riley's writing, she's written a ton of other books as well, so it'll be a really fun, she's a really fun author to get into. So this series, A Duke, the Lady, and a Baby is the first book, and all three of the books in the series feature an organization called the Widow's Grace. So it's set in Regency England, so, you know, 1820s-ish, and the Widow's Grace is an organization that's comprised of widows who are all trying to help one another, sometimes covertly, sometimes they're breaking into buildings to look at files, but basically you might not be surprised to hear that at this time, women who are widowed are often not treated very kindly by the law system and their relatives, especially if they have money. So the main character is Patience Jordan, and she is from the West Indies, so she's black, so that's already difficult for her, being, you know, a wealthy black woman in this society who has recently lost a husband, supposedly to suicide. And, you know, she's got a lot of wealth, he's got a lot of wealth. People want that, so her deceased husband's uncle is interested in this fortune, and so has Patience committed to an insane asylum. The Widow's Grace comes in, gets her out of the asylum, and basically disguises her as a nanny because she has also recently had a baby, and so the uncle needs to have this baby in order to get her fortune. So, but the cousin of her, so Patience's husband's cousin, has come in. He is an honorable good man. He's the Duke of Reppington. He doesn't much care for the uncle. He has come in to try and help this young baby who his cousin has left behind and try and find his widow. But Patience is afraid of what he might think of this widow having been committed to an insane asylum. So the Widow's Grace disguises her as a nanny to the baby to get her in there so she can care for the baby and also try to figure out what really happened to her husband. And of course, romance ensues. So one of the fun things about this series is that Vanessa Riley, she's also a black author who is a historian, so she's done a lot of historical research for this series. And the backs of the books have lots of interesting facts about black people in London. They were called blackamoors often, and there's also recipes because there's a lot of cooking that involves, so it's like some historical recipes. So there's like serious elements to it, and dealing with, you know, so Patience is dealing with the death of her husband, but she's also dealing with a lot of racism from, you know, the society at large. So it's really a really fun romance that, especially if you like Bridgerton, you like that whole, you know, the Regency romance, this is a really great series for you to get into. All right. Next up, Ronnie Lauren, The Ones Who Got Away. This is another series and another great author. If you like this book, there are 3 other books in this series, and if you like Ronnie Lauren, a ton of other stuff that she's written as well. So the premise for this series, I will admit, sounds a bit like, how do you write a romance around this theme? Because basically the main characters in these 4 books are all survivors of a high school shooting that happened like 15 years in the past. So it's not like fresh trauma for them, but it's still, their trauma kind of goes throughout the stories, and a lot of what also goes out throughout the stories is how they're dealing with it years later and how they're trying to make the world a better place, sort of because of the trauma that they went through. So the first book in this series basically begins at like the an anniversary, it's been a certain number of years after this shooting, so a lot of these women, the four main characters have all sort of lost touch with each other in this intervening time period, but they're all brought back together because there's a documentary being filmed. So Liv, who is the first of our lady protagonists here, is coming back. She's kind of run away from it's based very loosely around the Columbine shootings, but it's set in sort of the Long Acres in Texas, so it's a little bit removed from that story. But Liv has come back. She's run away from town to try and put this past behind her. She comes back to town for this documentary, and her old high school flame is there, whose name is Finn, who has since become a police officer and like an undercover detective who's made it his mission in life to try and figure out how the two teen shooters got these guns, because there's like this whole like illegal gun thing going on, so he's like trying to investigate that. But they had a very passionate but secret romance when they were in high school, because she's Latina and her dad was he did lawn maintenance, and so basically her dad worked for Finn's family because he was white and rich. Then his parents wouldn't have approved of the relationship, so it was sort of secret, but as a result, he didn't actually end up taking her to the prom, which is where the shooting happened. So there's a lot of that sort of very intense trauma, but it's been years and they both have their secrets and they're kind of getting back together, but they don't want it to be, so there's a lot of emotions. But it's also, aside from the romance, that this series is really also about these four women who are the four protagonists of the books getting back together and reforming this really amazing friendship. So they all, immediately after the shooting, they were in a support group together, and they, wrote these notes about, what they were going to do with their futures to, make sure that their lives aren't it's like, we've survived this, and we've got to make something out of our lives. And so when they get back together 15 years later, for this documentary, they all get together and reread the letters they wrote and kind of get re-inspired to do these things that they wanted to do with their lives that kind of got put on hold because of all this trauma that happened. And it's really fun to see these women come back together and support one another and be there for one another. The ones who got away. All right, the last book I'm going to talk about, this is currently a standalone. I'm privately hoping that they write a sequel, but they write all over. So this is You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty by Akwege Emeze. And they have, if you're familiar with their work, which if you've watched my other videos, I talk a lot about their books because I love their books, but they've written all sorts of, they've written teen fiction, they've written literary fiction, they've written poetry, they've written memoirs, they've written pretty much everything. So this is their first foray into romance, and it's very steamy. So if it opens with a sex scene, so it's detailed, so if that's not your thing, I will give you that warning. But if you like that sort of thing, definitely read this. So this is another book that kind of features trauma. Faye is the main character, and she lost her husband in a car accident 5 years ago, and they were in a very passionate romance. They were very in love, and so she's in her late 20s now. She's a widow. She's in New York City trying to move beyond this trauma, and she lives with her best friend Joy, and they're just trying. Faye's just decided she's just gonna have some fun, light flings, nothing serious. She doesn't think she can handle it, so that's kind of why it opens with this. She just kind of meets this guy, they have an instant connection, they go to the bathroom and have a fun time. But ultimately this leads her to another guy who seems really good and fun and interesting, and they're really having a connection. She really wants to take it slow, and he invites her on sort of a loose work vacation. For her it's work because she's an artist and she's trying to make it into the art world, and this new friend that she's made says, he has family on this island, and they've got an art gallery that would be interested in her work, so he invites her along to come and, you know, do this art show and, have a beach vacation for like 2 weeks. And without giving too much away while she's there, there's some connections that fly with somebody else in this guy's family that she really shouldn't be having a relationship with. But they cannot deny their attraction to one another, and things go from there. So it's sort of a complicated emotional story because there's a lot that she's going through, trying to deal with, trying to process the loss of her husband, wanting to still work on her art, and then trying to accept that it's okay for her to move beyond and find her own joy and passion and not worry about what other people are going to think. And like all of Okwege Emezi's books, it's fantastically written, and I am very much hoping that at one point they decide to write another romance involving Faye's best friend Joy. But for now, that's it for me. Thank you for watching. Enjoy your Bookstore Romance day. And if you like what we're doing here, we'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe to our channel. Thanks so much. Bye.